Welcome to the Parental Compass. I'm your host, Bobby Williams, episode 2. So, on today's show, we're going to be talking with Jody Smetak. Jody is a therapist and parenting coach who I have worked with for several years, a very knowledgeable woman. And the topic of today's episode is raising teenagers. So, it's a unique time in life. And there's a lot of things going on, but we're not gonna skirt around the issues. Nay, we're gonna address them head on. So we'll be talking about how do you talk with your kids about drug use or sex or even suicidal feelings. So I think there's a lot of important takeaways you can get from this episode. Welcome to the Parental Compass.
I wish something like this was available when I was raising kids.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you here. So drop your credentials on us. What have you done in this field?
So I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. I'm a child mental health specialist. Mm-hmm. And I'm working to fulfill my credentials for my CDP or my SUD, substance use disorder license. And so I'm currently collecting hours for that.
Wow. And you've done a lot of work with, I know we work together at Community Youth Services. You've worked with hundreds of families and teenagers, especially.
Yes, I sure have. I've worked with a lot of teenagers through I had a private practice for 8 years.
Well, and that's the topic today. We're going to talk about, dealing with teenagers, your own teenagers. I know you have children too. You have two 20-year-olds, right?
I do. Yeah, so, I don't know how that happened. They're 20 now.
You have some lived experience in this also.
Yes.
So, I think being a teen, it's a difficult time in life. You have all these emotions going on.
Yeah.
And some of that, it seems like it's even tied into brain development. Like there is a reason why teenagers are the way they are. Am I right?
You're absolutely right, Bobby. Teenage brains or brains in general don't fully develop till about age 25. Can even go a little bit higher than that. And so there's a lot of things happening in the brain right now, a lot of development. At this point in their brain development, the last thing to develop is that prefrontal cortex, mm-hmm. which has some of that impulsivity, that decision-making, the risk-taking behaviors. And this is why a lot of teens can get labeled as a bad kid, when in fact, some of it you can attribute to brain development.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, also being that it's just a very emotional time, I remember, just being a very emotional teenager, you just really feel your feelings at that time, I remember just sitting in my room listening to Coldplay or something. And I guess my question is, how can you tell what is serious depression versus what is a teenager just being a teenager? When do you raise the red flag and start having to address it?
Well, I think, the first thing that comes to mind is any behavior that's out of the ordinary. And a lot of parents might say, making that decision is out of the ordinary. But what I'm really talking about is their day-to-day routine. Are they sleeping longer? Are they eating less? Mm-hmm. Are they not socializing as much? Those are all red flags to watch for and address, and try to get them some help if that's what's needed.
Yeah. So how do you address it then? You notice your teen is acting different and it's, probably more than a week or so. It's been a few weeks and they're not the same. What do you do next?
Yeah, I think it all starts with having that connection with your teen, and there's lots of ways you can connect with them. I think once that connection is there, then these conversations can become normal conversations with your everyday talks with them. But I think having that connection with them and key things to that are, really get on their level. We always talk about being on little kids' levels so that you're not, hovering over them and instilling fear. Well, the same thing with the teen. You may not have to hover over, but get on their level, use their language, find out what excites them, get involved with that. My son liked rap music and I didn't. Of course, until I started watching The Bridge.
Sweet, yeah.
And I got to see, how fun it could be, but show interest in what they're interested in and build that connection.
Yeah.
So
who's your favorite rapper now?
Oh, gosh. I couldn't tell you, Bobby. I don't know. I would say, I'm going to say you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying of find a way to connect with your kids. I remember you were telling me before your son was into video games, and so you actually tried playing video games with them. And so it doesn't even have to be something you like, just as long as you're doing something with them, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, really showing an interest, you're right, whether you like it or not. I knew nothing about video games. We agreed that we would do something together, and I let him decide, and that's what he chose. And he was probably, I don't know, 14, 15. And it was interesting. I was terrible. What it did was it allowed him to become the teacher, which, is also working on that brain development. They're having to talk and think and explain something to another person. And so that in itself is huge.
Yeah.
So,
well, a big takeaway I'm getting from what you're saying is just keeping that dialogue going, keeping connected with your kids makes a big difference.
Yeah.
What about when you come into difficult situations, though? Or I think about when you're a teenager, it's often the time when you are experimenting with some weed or some alcohol. What do you do? What's normal? What's not okay? And how do you address it?
Yeah. So, I hear a lot, through my work at community youth services, a lot of adolescents saying, well, weed is legal. And that's true. You can't argue with that. If you're
over 21,
it's not legal for them. And so really educating yourself so that you can educate your teens. And there's lots of ways that you can get educated about this. But I think if you come into a situation and it's difficult, or you find something, I think the first thing is to not overreact. Not that you're not going to address it.
Yeah.
But don't overreact and take the time to think about how do you want to handle that before you react immediately.
Have you ever been in a situation like this where you catch your child with something?
Absolutely. So there's two. One, I got a call to go pick up my son who was passed out. This was probably the worst parenting moment ever for me. Was passed out, and I had to go pick him up and bring him home. And obviously that I wasn't going to talk to him because you don't want to talk to him and when they're drunk.
Yeah. Was he at a party or where was he?
He was just at a friend's. Yeah, just at a friend's house, and the dad called me. So I went and got him, and I'm not going to lie, I was really upset.
Sure.
For a lot of reasons, and at several people. But I think the takeaway in that, the way that I handled that was I brought him home. I made him get in the shower because he had vomited on himself. And after that, I just had him sit in a chair, and we just waited. And it was probably later that night or maybe even the next day that we really had a conversation about what could have happened and, what was going on for him. And, but the point is not to have those conversations in the moment.
Yeah. So was that a heated conversation when you talked about him with him later?
It was not. And I think that, I think for me and my background a little bit might have been a little bit easier, but for me, it was just a conversation. It wasn't, and I think that if I remember right, I think the first thing I said was, I'm not mad. Like, I get it. I totally get it. And, here's what could have happened. And
Yeah.
so that education, I think, is super important. And when you think they're not hearing it, they're hearing you. And they may
Yeah.
say they don't want to hear it, but they're hearing you. So don't stop talking.
Those moments do sort of stick with you too,
Oh
of,
yeah.
times you're in awkward situations and your parents catch you, or I think
Yeah.
the challenge is, it sounds like you're saying you don't want to shame your kids.
Right. You don't want to shame him, and you don't want to, the other time was I found some beer under his bed. And,
Mhm.
in that situation, I wouldn't have said to him, did you hide some beer in your room? Because
Yeah.
I already know the answer to that question. And so, that had to go a little bit differently, but it's all about that connection. And yeah, without shame, absolutely without shame. I love you. I don't love your behavior in this situation.
Mhm.
But I always will love you, and kind of encompass it with, the positives on both sides of it, a little sandwich. And in the middle is, I'm frustrated or I'm angry about that behavior, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I've heard in kind of work situations or other things, like if you can have kind of a compliment sandwich of
Yes.
something relatively positive, dip
Yep.
to the heavy side, end on a positive note.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
mhm.
Exactly.
What about sex things? Because, young people are, you're a sexual creature.
Yep.
How do you address that where you want your child to behave responsibly? It's
Mm-hmm.
an awkward topic to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Well, I think first, kind of asking yourself, have we talked about this? You
Hmm.
know, um, and if not, then how do we want to talk about this? It can be awkward, but it doesn't have to be. And
Yeah.
I think again, it comes down to educating. In the therapy world, we call it providing psychoeducation. And so educating them on, um, you're an adolescent, you're gonna probably have these desires, you're gonna be put in situations where you need to know what to do, um, and these are some things that you can do, and really just reinforcing safe sex, um, really reinforcing they can come to you and talk about anything. I think before you have these conversations, you have to really work on your own internal dialogue of, am I going to be comfortable with this? Because they're going to read it if you're not.
Yeah.
So I think, just in reaching out, if you don't know how to have those conversations, reaching out to supports. There's lots of supports in our community, and I would say, don't ever hesitate to use our community. There's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah. It's a tough time. Not everyone's feeling at their best.
Yeah.
Where can you turn to for support? Like, say your child is depressed, you don't know what to do. Um, it's tough to get this active dialogue
Yeah.
going with your child. Like, where
Yeah.
can you go to get better at these kind of things?
Well, I think, the first thing a lot of parents hear are, I need to put my child in therapy. And that's a great start. Um, the problem can become for adolescents, they get to choose that. They're most of them over the age of 13. They get to choose if they want to do that.
Yeah.
At Community Youth Services in our Transitional Age Youth Program, we are, and this is a really, really great point for a lot of our youth, is we are one of the only agencies that run a youth-driven program.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is this youth is in the driver's seat, and then his supports are in the rest of the car. If the car starts to veer off the road a little bit, we can all lean this way and get him back on the road.
Yeah.
And so I think, getting him into therapy is great. I think the other things that can help are getting active and involved in pro-social activities as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And, anybody that wants to rap, of course, we're going to refer them to the bridge.
Yep, we got that resource available.
Yeah. And for parents, Family Education and Support Center has a ton of resources for parents and kinship providers. So there's ways, reach out to me, reach out to Bobby, whoever, or, reach out to your supports and ask about resources. I'm happy to share.
I'll leave some links to resources in the description of this video also.
Yeah.
Well, Jody, do you have any parting words or advice for parents who might be listening to this today?
I think, Bobby, if I could give you some links, send you some links to some great books.
What, name a book. What's your top book right now?
So one book that is phenomenal for understanding is, it's kind of a weird title, but it's Get Out of My Life. But first, will you take me and Cheryl to the mall?
Awesome title.
And so it's that push-pull, like, I want to be independent. Oh, wait a minute, I still need you a little bit. And so that's one. And the other one is, yes, your teen is crazy. And so while I don't like the word crazy, it's a great book. And it talks about the brain development. It talks about what you're seeing in your kid. And, we have to remember that they're right on track developmentally. That's where they need to be. And so those are two great books that I would highly recommend.
Well, sure. Jody, just thanks so much for taking the time. It's been awesome working with you over the years, and just thanks for the work you're doing in our community.
Absolutely, Bobby. And I thank you for all the work you're doing with the youth in our community. I've seen remarkable outcomes, and keep doing what you're doing.
Right on. I'm just so glad that we have people like Jody in our community, doing the work to just help make it a better place, and to do it in such a sincere and just authentic way. So Jody, just thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Next week, I'm very excited for it. We're going to be speaking with Patrick Murphy, who is the superintendent of the Olympia School District. So we're going to be talking all about education. So be sure to tune in. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Peace.